Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for coming. As you all know, today's talk is everything on sleep, and I'm really looking forward to this because there is so much on sleep, and it genuinely is the most powerful change you can make to your life would be improving your sleep. By the end of this talk, you're going to know how sleep works, why we sleep, the benefits of getting good sleep, the consequences of not getting enough, and you're going to learn about how you can actually ensure a good night's sleep. As well, I will be touching on insomniacs and what to do for insomniacs, and how sleep is different for women, which is important for both men and women to know, so we can share our knowledge to everyone. So, to start, well, that's not formatted, but that would say sleep. A lot of people talk about different pillars of health. A lot of people mention diet and exercise, and sleep is normally up there as a pillar, but I don't believe it's a pillar, and taking from Matthew Walker's words, sleep is the foundation of health. It's not just a pillar, it's the foundation that holds up all the other pillars. Sleep is there as a process. Biologically, it's evolved and built into us because every time we're going through our day, we're damaging our bodies. And sleep is our opportunity and time to heal our bodies, restore and recover ourselves. That's how important it is. Everything else you do in your health will depend on sleep, because sleep is your opportunity to recover. Every major system, tissue and organ of your body depends on sleep. We thrive when we get it, and we suffer when we don't. There's a really cool theory actually that I'm really fond of, and that's how did sleep evolve? And if we look back generations and generations of animals, and we can look about 500 million years ago into some worms, and we discover that even in those 500 million year old worms, they also slept. So it becomes the question of, where did sleep come from? Why do we sleep? And although there's various theories, I'm just going to share with you my favourite because I find it interesting. And it's the idea that as the first species, we came out existing in a state of sleep. We were in a state of constant perpetual recovery and safety. We were just always asleep. From there, the state of wakefulness evolved. And that's why we are always kept asleep, because sleep is where we recover, and wakefulness was our opportunity to explore the planet and actually have an advantage of being able to move and be active over other animals. And sleep has always remained fundamental. So how do we sleep? There was a study done in about the 1700s where a scientist took a plant, which, as we know, let's take a sunflower. A sunflower tracks the sun as it moves across the sky. And they wanted to know, well, how does it track it? How does it know where it's going across the sky? Is it constantly checking where the sun is? Or is there something about it that's innately knowing where the sun's going to be? And so they took this sunflower and they put it in a black box so it had no access to sunlight. None whatsoever. And what they discovered is that even after 6 hours in the dark, it had moved. That may seem trivial, but what that means is the plant has a clock inside it. Inside its biology, there is a clock telling it what time it is and where to face. A couple hundred years later, the most dedicated scientists there may have ever been, in 1938, they took food and water and they wanted to test humans. They took some food, water, and they went into a deep dark cave, the Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, and they went in pitch black, wanted to test what happens to human biology. And if you've ever been in pitch black in a cave, it's a really weird experience looking around and literally you just can't see anything. It's quite eerie not knowing something's going to jump out at you. And they were so brave, and they went down, and they had hospital beds, which you don't know, they're kind of like bunk beds, but they're quite tall up. And the legs of the beds were in buckets of water so no animals could attack them. And while they were down there, they were experimenting. How long were they awake for? How long were they asleep for? What was their temperature variation, to see how their bodies responded. And they came across two discoveries. The first is, like plants, humans kept time. They would consistently be awake for about 16 hours and then have a 9-hour sleep, approximately. That was the consistent routine they were coming across. So humans, like animals, without sun, have an ability to keep time. The other discovery was really profound and is why we need to prioritize and be aware of our sleep and why we need to control it, is that their circadian rhythm, their body's time, was approximately 24 hours. Not exactly. There was something about their body's clock that was slightly shorter that meant they weren't sleeping exactly 24 hours and they were constantly clocking back on the clock. And that is really important because it means you can't just wake up, be born, set your clock once and just keep going. You've constantly got to be setting it throughout your life. And that's why later on when I go into all the protocols of how to set, it's really important. Since then, more studies have been done, and we now know why and how our body biologically sets our clock. Inside our brain, we have what's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which I think is a brilliant word. The suprachiasmatic nucleus will tell the rest of the body what time it is. It does this through a hormone called melatonin. I'm going to draw on the board. Can you see here? I'm going to draw on the board. We go here. We got time, and we got melatonin up here. The way melatonin works is it is designed to make you go to sleep, so it pulses kind of like that. About here, now isn't the best, you'll start feeling tired. Now, although melatonin doesn't cause you to go to sleep, all melatonin does is tell the rest of your body what time it is. So it tells, say, another part of your brain called the thalamus to start getting ready to sleep. And your thalamus is then what is causing you to go to sleep. So to explain it more, if I were to remove your thalamus from your brain, you don't need to worry about what it does, but if I were to remove it from your brain, even if I were to pump you with drugs and drugs of melatonin, that wouldn't make you go to sleep. You would need your thalamus. So melatonin causes other parts of your body to go to sleep. That's why these pills, sleep pills, don't always work. So that's when you start feeling tired, which would be about, 8 or 9. Your melatonin goes up, as controlled by a suprachiasmatic nucleus, is in the middle of the night. And as it starts coming down, you'll start falling out of sleep around here. So let's go that way. And that's when you start waking up. As your melatonin starts dipping, you start feeling more alert and more ready to go awake. I mean, it's not the most accurate graph, but then from there, you end up going back to sleep. And as it starts spiking, that starts getting you back into sleep. Melatonin is the primary way your body is telling you what time it is. There are other aspects, but melatonin is the focus. The next one. This one's pretty cool because, it seems sort of magical and movie-like. From the moment you wake up, every second you're awake, it's constantly going, is your brain is producing a compound called adenosine. Adenosine is telling your body how tired you are. It's literally counting the amount of time you've been awake. As your adenosine builds up, you start feeling more tired and more groggy. Eventually, separate to melatonin, independent of it, eventually adenosine will make you feel so tired you conk out and fall asleep. So melatonin combined with adenosine, you have more sleep. Now onto the antagonist. The opposite, I think I have a red pen. The opposite of melatonin is called cortisol. Cortisol works in the opposite way to melatonin, where you may have heard of it as a stress hormone. Although true, cortisol is focused on giving you focus. It makes you alert. When you wake up in the morning, start here, you experience a boost in cortisol. That's what wakes you up, that's what gets you alert, gives you energy. This boost will then last throughout the day and it'll go back down again and it repeats. If you have a lot of cortisol, when you're trying to go to sleep, you're not going to be able to go to sleep as easily. It's a stress on your body. It's your body's way of telling you you're in danger. And we'll get more into that later. I'm going to touch on one more point, and that is sleep chronotypes. Hardwired into your DNA is the way you sleep. Some people are morning, some people are afternoon, some people are sleep. It's a wiring in your DNA, and it's the way you are. So there isn't so much point fighting it. Morning people, like myself, love getting up in the morning. We thrive, we got energy, focus, drive in the morning. Night people, at 10, 11, 12, that's when they've got their energy. That's when they're thriving. And another separate point, the society needs to cater for these different variations, instead of, as we are at the moment, focusing on morning people. Because then those night people are going to be able to thrive in their jobs if they're allowed to work. They're going to push the business further, earn more money, etc. So that's how we need to encompass those. But just be aware, as I go through the talk and the protocols I'm talking about, you need to learn what your own chronotype is and encompass it. So that's how sleep works. It's pretty simple. And I'm going to read you a cool statement from the book I've been reading. And this cool statement really summarizes the benefits of sleep and should help motivate you. This tells you why sleep's so important. So, and I quote from Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. Amazing breakthrough. Scientists have discovered a revolutionary new treatment that makes you live longer. It enhances your memory and makes you more creative. It makes you look more attractive, keeps you slim and lowers food cravings. It protects you from cancer and dementia. It wards off colds and the flu. It lowers your risk of heart attacks and stroke, not to mention diabetes. You'll even feel happier, less depressed and less anxious. Yes, the solution is a full night of consistent, good quality sleep. And this is backed up by over 17,000 well-scrutinized studies. That statement is completely true. You can prove everything that I've said there. I'm not going to go into all of it because it's enormous. There's so much data. I'm certainly going to touch on some of the most important and interesting ones. When you've learned how sleep works. I'm going to teach you about the benefits and then we will go on to how you can improve your sleep because it's so simple and it can make such a powerful and impactful change in your life. So one of the first ones I mentioned was memory. As you're going through your day, for example, as I'm talking to you now, this information is going into your brain, it's going into a region in your brain called the hippocampus. This is storing that information temporary. You may have heard the term short-term storage. It is a short-term storage. As that information goes into your brain and it resides there, your hippocampus can't take on more information once it's full. The information will either just bounce off or it will replace other information. It is a capacity. What's then amazing is when you go to sleep at night, your brain, currently your brain's going as its frequency is constantly changing, varying depending on what's going on around you. When you go to sleep, there is a certain stage in sleep called NREM where your brain will start pulsing at similar frequency. It goes. In that process, this is what's amazing. In that process, those facts and memories and information in your hippocampus is genuinely, literally transported into a different part of your brain called the cortex. Your brain is transferring information just like a computer would onto a hard drive. And in that cortex, we don't know how big it is, but it can just be there as long-term storage. So now you've freed up your hippocampus. What this means is now, when you wake up, you've got a freed hippocampus, you've got fresh storage for new information, and you can go about your day and you can collect new information. And as well, that makes you appreciate how important it is to go to sleep. Because if you don't go to sleep, that information in your hippocampus, it's going to get full, it's going to get replaced by other information, you're going to lose it, you're going to forget more facts, you're going to do worse in your exams, you're going to be unable to perform your best in your job. That's what's brilliant about sleep. For example, there's a very cool study where people who took, I'll go into this more afternoon naps later, people who took a 90-minute nap had 20% increased ability to learn information. So if you're all students, imagine after you've had 3 lectures in the morning and you've got another 2 in the afternoon, imagine in your lunch break, in your couple of hours, you took even just a 30-minute break. You're going to improve your ability to remember that information later on. People demonize naps, but they're so beneficial because you can really boost your ability to remember information. As well, there was a really cool study where participants were given some information. They were then said, some participants learned it in the morning, and so they went into the afternoon, so a whole full day of 8 hours, and where they didn't sleep and they were tested. The other participants were taught in the evening and hence slept 8 hours before being tested. The difference, having slept, was a 20 to 40% increased memory retention. Because of their sleep, they remembered 20 to 40% more information. And what's key is that was the benefit tonight. If you choose to go out tonight, by all means, do. But any information you've learned today will be significantly lost compared to if you went out Saturday night where you've not had a day at university learning things. As well, if you are someone who pulls an all-nighter, students who pull all-nighters will have a 40% deficit in the ability to remember new facts, to make new memories. 40% loss from pulling an all-nighter, so it's not very beneficial. This is a slightly more somber aspect of sleep. There is a very good researcher on what happens to people when they go a long time without sleep, when they're chronically sleep deprived. And he wanted to look at what happens when someone goes 24 hours without sleeping. What happens to their ability to drive? How much more dangerous are they on the road? A lot of people know as you don't sleep, you become a lot slower and drowsier. But not many people know that you have what are called microsleeps, where your brain full on switches off for 2-3 seconds. You aren't conscious and you fall asleep. If you imagine you're going down a motorway at 60 miles an hour, it happens every day. And all of a sudden you fall asleep at the wheel for even just 2 seconds. That's more than enough to crash into a car on the side of the road and kill yourself and someone else. And that's just from 24 hours without sleeping. What becomes more worrying is that from those 24 hours is you have a 400% increase in these microsleeps. 400% more likely to crash on the line. You get the same 400% if you were to sleep 4 hours a night for 6 nights. You would have 400% increased microsleeps. And again, you get the same problem if you sleep 6 hours for 11 nights. Sleep is exceptionally deadly, and it's not really put out there. It's not made illegal to drive under too little sleep. An Australian study that's somewhat famous and you might have heard of, they noticed that being awake for 19 hours makes you as cognitively impaired as being legally drunk. And you might know someone, a lot of people famously will go out at the bar at night and not drink because it's illegal to then drive home. But they are as cognitively impaired as even though they had, say they had woken up at 7 a.m, gone through the whole day, went out late at night, and then at 2 a.m. in the morning, they decided to drive home. They're just as cognitively impaired, just as dangerous on the road, but it's not made illegal. One thing you can do, and you will have heard of this, that it's pretty cool, is a bit of an offset, and this touches on my point on memory as well. Back in, I think it was the 1980s, pilots would have to do exceptionally long flights, as they do at the moment. They would go from America all the way down to Australia or something, and it's something like a 36-hour flight. It's very taxing on their bodies. And sleep researchers wanted to know, this is a pilot, they're carrying thousands or hundreds of lives with them. They need to be able to perform at high level. They need to be focused and alert. So how can we improve their sleep? How can we optimize it such they're maximally awake and alert for the duration of their flight, especially the landing? And using some clever estimation and guess, they deduced that if they put a nap at the beginning of their flight, I think it was 30 to 90 minute nap, that would give them a buffer that protected them for the end of the journey. And when they were talking to the pilot agency after having tested this, they were saying, we came up with this brilliant idea, and the pilot agency was like, that's great, what was the idea, what are you going to call it? And hold up, words. And they called it prophylactic naps. And the pilot agent was like, you can't call it that. You're going to get mocked at and laughed at. And they were like, okay. We'll call it planned napping. And they were like, no, you can't tell pilots that. That's going to make them feel like you're telling them what to do. So, okay. And they eventually, the pilot agency, the flying agency, settled on power napping. And that is where the concept of a power nap comes from. It was initially invented for pilots. Now, although it does buffer your sleep, it must be said, it certainly doesn't fix it. If you don't get enough sleep, nothing will replace that. There is no drug, no medicine, no procedure. Nothing has ever been discovered or even come close to that which replaces sleep. Sleep is essential. Let me just see what the time is. Another really cool story is that of the Greeks. As I was saying earlier, they're both the Spanish. So here's a cool story about siestas. A lot of European countries, as you may know, will take siestas, which is where they take about an afternoon break, where they take a nap or socialise and are a lot more relaxed. If you've ever been to Greece, you might walk around the cities and you see shops. And for English people, it's quite an unusual experience because you see their shops say open 9 to 1, closed 1 to 3, and then open again in the evening, which is quite unusual. And some scientists were curious, what are the benefits of a siesta? And so over a 4-year period, as the Greeks became more modernised, as they stopped taking siestas, they studied something like 380,000 Greeks to see what happens to their life expectancy over those 4 years. They discovered that those who don't have a siesta over those 4 years were 37% more likely to die from a heart-related condition. In working men, that was 60% more likely to die from a heart-related condition because they stopped taking siestas. There is more evidence that we should start taking siestas, that we should sleep twice in 24 hours. Currently, we sleep once, most of us. This is called monophasic. To sleep twice is biphasic, and sleep like a baby multiple times a day is polyphasic. There is evidence amassing that not only is it good for our memory, as I said earlier, to take an afternoon nap, but it's beneficial for our heart health and many other aspects of our health. So if you are feeling that afternoon grog and tired feeling we often get, I do recommend leaning into it. Take a 30-90 minute nap. Not past 3, but take a nap and see what the benefits are. The two most feared diseases throughout developed nation, cancer and Alzheimer's, are related to inadequate sleep. The fact that the most feared diseases can be prevented and improved and even in some cases treated through sleep is extraordinary. For example, in the case of Alzheimer's, especially now, has been really linked to what are called beta amyloids. These are little compounds that float around in your brain and they basically rot your brain and cause parts of your brain to not function. What sleep's been shown to do is sleep has this system which cleans them out. So you may have heard of your lymphatic system, which is a drainage system you have in your body going everywhere. It cleans out toxins, it cleans your body, it refreshes it. It makes you clean and cleansed. Similarly, about 6-7 years ago, there was discovered a glymphatic system in your brain. These consist of glia cells, and like the lymphatic system, it cleans out the dirt and debris from your day, from your thoughts, from creating new memories, losing old ones. That's what they clean out. And one of the compounds they clean out, among many, is that beta amyloid. And that beta amyloid is what potentially is likely to cause Alzheimer's, which means sleep genuinely prevents and reduces your risk of Alzheimer's just from sleep. In the case of cancer, we're not told this, and I think it's quite profound, because we're not told that there is a natural treatment within our bodies to kill and fight off cancer. They're called natural killer cells. It's a pretty unoriginal name, but but they go and kill cancer cells. Studies show that a single night of just 4 hours sleep will reduce these cancer-killing cells by 70%. One night. The fact that sleep not only has that impact on Alzheimer's, but cancer. You can also go beyond that, and you notice that it impacts heart disease and so many other aspects of health. That's why I think it's so profound, and there's so much to it. As well, the less you sleep, the more you eat. When you're without sleep, your body is under stress, it's under a strain. It needs to keep itself alive, it's struggling to keep itself alive. What does it do? It needs to get more energy, so you're going to start eating more. You're going to start consuming more food. As well as that, you're going to start putting on more fat. If you're going to burn fuel, you don't want to get rid of that fat, that energy, you're going to burn muscle. And that's why people who are on a diet, if they're sleeping 5.5 hours compared to 8.5 hours, they will lose 70% of their weight to muscle and fat. As well, you want more sugar in your blood. You want to be able to, if a lion chases after you, you're tired, you need to be on alert, you need to have energy, you don't want to be going to sleep. So you have more sugar in your blood. If I were to give you a dose of glucose, a standard dose, while you're on 4 hours sleep, I believe it was 4 hours sleep, for 6 nights, you would be 40% worse at responding to that glucose, at managing it. For context, if you were to have that experience with a doctor, they would tell you you're pre-diabetic and put you on a diabetes program. That's how significant it is. And for context, the more sugar you end up having in your blood over longer term, not only if you end up with diabetes will it chop 10 years off your life, it'll cost you about £85,000. It is just mind-blowing, all from sleep. My favourite, and last one, sorry it's been long, but there is genuinely as well, follow the society afterwards because there are so many benefits, and I'm going to put this all in a newsletter and there'll be so much more information there. The last one is a very well controlled sleep study. This is my favourite because it's something that's sort of, it's a bonus incentive for everyone. People who slept 8 hours compared to 5 hours were perceived as not only looking less tired, not only looking healthier, but genuinely, significantly looking more attractive. Sleep makes you more attractive. I think that's so cool that from getting a sleep, you can genuinely make people find you more attractive. It's not just something you're born with your looks, you can make people perceive you more attractive. And that's from one night of getting good 8-hour sleep compared to 5. So they're the consequences and benefits of getting good sleep. It depends how you look at it. I'm now going to go into how sleep actually works. Sorry. There we go. How to improve sleep. There are, I think I amassed a total of 16 different ways you can improve your sleep. I'm not going to go through all of them because it would take far too long, but this is why I'm going to remind you, join our society, and your access to the newsletter, you're not joined, it's partially for the camera, but you'll have access to our newsletter, and from there, when we send out the newsletter, you can get my full notes and you can get the full rundown. So, as I said about earlier, we've got our melatonin, we've got our cortisol, and we've got our adenosine. Mastering those, especially the melatonin, that's the big one. When we master those, we'll master our sleep. You have a general understanding of how these work, but there is a fundamental rule to controlling melatonin. As I said before, when those two scientists went down into that cave for 32 days, they kept a rhythm, but it wasn't exactly 24 hours. So your suprachiasmatic nucleus, what controls your circadian rhythm, will be influenced, will be set by anything consistent. Anything that tells it this is consistently the time, it will pick up on, and it will use that as the time. And that can be anything. It could be when you get light in the morning. It can be when you eat, when you exercise, changes in temperature, even something more peculiar such as your social time. If you're regularly socializing in the evenings, it can help you fall asleep. Anything it can use that is consistent in nature will help, it will latch onto and use for sleep. The most important, the one that has been going on for our entire lifetime, the lifetime of the planet, is the sun. So the most important thing to do is to get morning light. That is when you're setting your circadian rhythm. And it is linked to doing it consistently. If you get morning light at 5 a.m. one day and 9 a.m. the other day, that's going to confuse your body. You need to go for a consistent wake and sleep time. All of this, as I said, it depends on consistency. If you go off one day, you'll be fine. Those scientists were in the cave for 32 days. You'll be fine. But equally, you will experience losses. You do want to be going at least every 3 days before you're back to a consistent routine. So, morning light. Within the first 30 minutes, you want 5 to 15 minutes of morning, unfiltered, bright sunlight. Don't stare at the sun if it's hurting your eyes, listen to your body. But you want that unfiltered sunlight. That's the first thing that will set up your circadian rhythm. In the winter, and this is where I have some props. In the winter, it gets a bit dull. Morning sunlight is fortunately free. This is what I actually use. This is what I use every morning to help me wake up. It's no plug, but it's basically a bright light that will shine on you. You can buy them off Amazon for £10, £20. Another thing I recently bought, these are more expensive, but is a very bright torch. So again, this just helps replicate the sun, because I want to consistently wake up at 7, whatever time of year it is, and at the moment it's pitch black at 7, so using these to wake up. The next step is, in the evening, you want to dim light.
No.
What? In the evening, you want to dim light. Since the invention of the light bulb, we've had control, as I said, over the most consistent aspect of our life. The sun used to rise and used to set, and that was it. We had campfires and they worked a little bit, but they weren't particularly influential on our ability to control light. Since the light bulb, we've had complete control. Since the LED, especially the blue one in the 1990s, we've had even more control. And you often hear people demonize blue light, and this is the reason. The reason blue light's worse is likely because our biology, we've evolved from marine animals. If you imagine as a marine animal looking up at the sun, it was obviously pretty blue. Hence why blue light is more effective to us than any other spectrum. And so as it comes to evening, you want to reduce your light. And for example, reading an iPad instead of reading from a book before bed has a 50%. Genuinely, you would be taking this graph from about here to down here, reduction in melatonin, which makes it significantly harder to fall asleep, significantly impairs your sleep. And so that is why it's really important to dim lights. That's completely free to do. In fact, it's cheaper, but also you can buy these if you want. These ones do a little bit of blue light, which I normally wear in the evening. These are what I wear at night, and they make everything completely red. They filter 100% of blue light. Now, that will still keep me awake. It's still bright, but it does still significantly improve my likelihood of falling asleep. Next up is exercise. Exercise does improve your sleep, but not late at night. So do exercise consistently during the day. It will help your sleep, but if you exercise before bed, it won't. And part of the reason is cortisol. Exercise is stress on the body, a good one, but it is stress, and that will wake you up. As well, it raises your body's temperature. And what studies show, and this is the next point, is that we ideally want to be sleeping around 18 degrees. As we go to sleep, as our melatonin starts rising up, our body's temperature starts decreasing. And it decreases by about 1 degree, which is, for a body, quite significant. And that decrease in temperature is really critical to actually initiate us into sleep and get us under and asleep. And so you can't exercise because it will not only stress your body but increase your temperature. As well, you want your temperature when you're sleeping, most people have it in 20, 22, you want it somewhere like 18. It must be above 12, below 12 is dangerous, but you want to be aiming for like 18 to get yourself into a sleep. The room is. Similar to to temperature is have a warm bath. This is a personal favourite because it's actually really enjoyable. When you have a warm bath or a shower, your body becomes really warm and it starts trying to cool itself off. So your blood vessels all dilate. Then as you get out the bath, your blood vessels are still dilating, still trying to cool your body, and it really rapidly will cool your body. And it will plummet your temperature, easily achieve a decrease in a degree, and you'll fall asleep like that. Genuinely, if you're struggling to go to sleep, try having a warm bath, pretty warm, not dangerous, but pretty warm, and see how quickly it takes you to sleep. The penultimate one is don't have alcohol, caffeine, nor nicotine before bed. Alcohol, you may think it's a bit of a sedative, it helps you go to sleep, and that's true. But sedatives aren't what you want to go to sleep. Whether that's in a pill or alcohol, it doesn't truly induce the same quality of sleep. And studies looking at your brain waves show that. It will never even begin to replicate or improve your sleep. The deficits of having alcohol before bed are extraordinary. There's a really good study where, let's take Monday as the start day. Monday you've been asked to study for an exam. You learn a load of information and a week later you're going to be tested. Now generally the students who study that information and get 8 hours of consistent sleep and then take the test, they basically get 100% on the test later on. Because that's what, it's really focused on that first day and they get 100%. They then look at students who study really hard on that first night, drink that night, and then take the test. They suffer a 50% amnesia of information. They forget 50% compared to those who just slept consistently. From that one night of alcohol, getting a little drunk. The next one, so it was Monday, then Tuesday, but Wednesday, it was good night's sleep, a little bit drunk, even though you might think, it's 2 days later, it doesn't matter if I drink now. They still suffered a 40% loss of information, which is, if you think about in the context of your exams, 40% really can be the difference between passing an exam extremely well and failing it. So it's quite a significant difference. Caffeine, on the other hand, is similar. Remember that adenosine we have in our brains? Caffeine essentially binds onto what receptors adenosine would use and prevents you from feeling that tired, groggy feeling. Nonetheless, adenosine is still in your brain and it builds up, which means once the caffeine's eventually got rid of, you suddenly clock out and you suddenly have that crash. That's why you get caffeine crashes. As well, a lot of people might think, I had caffeine at 6 and I slept really well and I think I'm fine with caffeine. That's not true. You can sleep with caffeine in your system, and a lot of people do, but that caffeine will still disrupt your sleep. Whether you actually get sleep and have a good quality sleep are different concepts. And the reason is caffeine has between 5 and 7 hours half-life, so we'll just call it 6 for simplicity. What this means is if you have a cup of coffee at 12, 6 hours later at 6 p.m, half of it's still in your body. Another 6 hours later, there's still a quarter in your body, which means you might as well at midnight have a quarter a cup of coffee. When it's stated like that, sounds a bit mad. So try and really restrict having coffee into the afternoon. And the last one is sleep debt cannot be settled. And studies prove that even if you were to go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday with 5 hours sleep and try and recover on the weekend by getting a full 8 or 9 hours sleep, it doesn't improve enough. You do get improvements, it's better than carrying on with 5, but it's not anywhere near worthwhile for your time. You need to be getting those consistent 8 hours. Sleep debt doesn't work. They are the main points. I am now going to touch on insomniacs and how sleep is different from them. There are over 100 different forms of insomnia. And there are many different concepts. It's partially genetic. There are many environmental factors. It's really complicated as to what it could possibly be that truly causes it. So I'm going to touch on one point I believe is really, really impactful for people. And this is that people spend so much of our time rushing around doing this, that and the other. We're meeting up with a friend, we're dealing with the work, we're getting the lunch ready, we're starting to clean the house, we're listening to music, we're watching a TV show. People are spending so much time rushing around, not giving themselves a moment to think about their lives and their problems. Except the one moment they think about their problems is when their head crashes on their pillow. And all of a sudden, there is a flood rush into the brain of, oh my God, I need to message my friend. Oh my God, I've got that email to reply to. I've got that assignment due tomorrow. There is so much that suddenly rushes into the head at the last possible moment you want it. And all of that suddenly boosts cortisol. It boosts that stress, and that isn't going to help you go to sleep. Once you're asleep, your body's in a state of stress. You're not going to get into a deep sleep. You're going to be on a semi-high alert. And so to me, although there can be many causes, I think a lot of insomniacs should focus on making sure before bed, half an hour before bed, 15 minutes if that's all you can do, just sit in bed, no screens, no tasks, no music, silence, and listen to your own thoughts. Give yourself more space to actually relax. Follow those other protocols I say without a doubt, follow them more strongly, but also focus on giving yourself that space to think. As well, there is something called paradoxical insomnia, where people believe they've got insomnia and sleep badly, and when they're tested, they actually don't. That's something else to be aware of, is maybe you think you're sleeping badly, but you're not, just as much as some people who sleep badly but don't think they do, which is a big one. A lot of people who are sleep deprived, like when I've talked about those people who sleep 4 hours for 6 days, when they're actually asked, how tired do you think they are, they go, a little. They don't appreciate how significantly sleep deprived they are, especially when it becomes their norm, and they've been doing it for a few months or even years, which is an enormous danger. I'm now going to go touch on how sleep is different for women. As I said earlier, this is important for men and women, and it's not the most well-researched area, but there are some takeaways. So estrogen, when estrogen is rising in the body, that tends to improve sleep quality, which is around about before and a little during ovulation. That's improving sleep quality. Progesterone, on the other hand, is quite mixed. It sometimes improves sleep, but it also sometimes worsens it, so the data isn't great behind it. Generally, women say the week before their period, they're sleeping worse. That's a general fact. But whether it's actually caused by estrogen is more complicated. It could be by social factors. It could be because they're just simply getting less REM but more NREM. It could be because they're eating more carbohydrates and large and sugary foods, which does disrupt sleep. So it's quite a complicated topic, and there's not enough data out there. So on the behalf of a lot of researchers and scientists, I'm sorry to all the women, because I just can't give you concrete information. As well, there's potentially enormous factors from social and life that men don't experience that women do. But there are still a couple grounding statistics where women who sleep less than 6 hours are 44% more likely to have an irregular period and 70% more likely to have a heavy period compared to 7 to 9 hours. It is a bidirectional relationship. Sleep affects menstrual cycle, and menstrual cycle affects sleep. Contraceptive pills appear to increase insomnia and sleepiness, but there isn't too much data, and to be fair, if period pains are too significant and are disrupting your sleep themselves, then contraceptive pills could be helpful. And it's a highly recommended advice that if you track your cycle and your sleep, you can either do that from your own perception, but also with something like a Whoop. If you're tracking both of those, you should be able to get a good idea as to how your sleep is linked to your cycle. Figure out the pattern for your own. That is everything. So thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed learning about how we sleep, why it's evolved, the enormous benefits, and then of course how we can actually improve it and how we have so much control over our own sleep. Which to me is the most important bit, is that you can make the changes yourself. You have the ability to improve your memory, reduce your risk of cancer and Alzheimer's, improve your physical performance. The list is everything. As I said, it's the foundation behind everything in our health physiology. This is my main resource. The newsletter will contain more references, specific references, but most of what I learned from here. The women's section was from this book, and as I said about our society, join the society and you can join our newsletter. And that is everything. Thank you.